It's folded on top of the bed, the shirt he wore every Sunday, the gray coat that still smells like him. And in a few hours, someone who never knew him will open that bag, pull out the garment, and press it against their body as if it were their own. You'll have done exactly what you were told to do. You'll have cleared out the closet without your hands shaking. But tonight, when you turn off the light, you're going to feel a weight in your chest that no one ever explained to you. And you're going to ask yourself one question, the one almost nobody dares to say out loud. What does the soul of the person who passed feel when a stranger puts on their clothes? Saint Teresa of Jesus left us an answer. An answer nothing like what the priest told you when he said, "Do whatever feels right, dear." A real answer, a detailed one that tells apart two gestures that look identical on the outside, but are worlds apart on the inside. What if everything hinged on one detail almost nobody checks before sealing the bag? One woman hands her husband's coat to the parish on a Tuesday. Another drops hers in a donation bin on her way somewhere Thursday. Both believe they're doing the same thing. The soul who wore that garment for 20 years does not experience it the same way. And while you listen to this, think of one specific piece of clothing, the one still sitting in your closet because nobody ever told you what to do with it. Type it in the comments and add, "Rest in peace," to the one who wore it. That right there is already a prayer. What Saint Teresa of Jesus wrote about this exact moment is speaking directly to you, by name. What the Church teaches about this moment has been taught for 20 centuries. It's written in the Desert Fathers, in St. Augustine, in the pastoral letters of the 4th century, when Christian widows asked their bishops what to do with the clothing of their martyred husbands. And it appears with a depth few saints have ever reached in the writings of Saint Teresa of Jesus. The doctrine is called the Communion of Saints. It's one of the 12 articles of the Creed. You say it every Sunday at Mass without stopping to think about what you're actually saying. But that short line, "I believe in the communion of saints," holds everything your heart needs to understand today. The Church has always taught that the living, the souls already in heaven, and the souls being purified in purgatory all form one mystical body, a single body where death doesn't separate its members or break the bond between them. And just as in a body, what happens in one part is felt in the others. So what you do today with your late father's clothes somehow reaches his soul, really reaches it. The Catechism puts it plainly. The members of the mystical body of Christ remain bound together in a constant exchange of spiritual goods. The prayers of the living, their sacrifices, their works of charity, cross the veil and reach the souls being purified. And those souls receive from God the grace their loved ones are obtaining for them from earth. What you do with their belongings matters. Your hands are still connected by a bond death cannot break to the soul of the person you love. There's a theological detail almost no one has ever explained to you. Clothing carries special weight in this teaching, because for years clothing was the boundary between the body and the world. It touched the skin, soaked up the sweat, accompanied every ordinary gesture of daily life. In Scripture, garments are mentioned again and again as a sign of identity. Christ on the cross didn't leave his tunic to chance among the soldiers. It was the last object connected to his humanity before the tomb. The disciples kept the cloths that wrapped his body. The early Christian communities venerated the cloths that had touched the bodies of martyrs, because they knew something of that earthly identity remained in the fabric. Saint Teresa of Jesus understood this from the inside out. She, who taught total detachment as the soul's path to God, drew a distinction many readers rush right past. One thing is for the soul itself to let go of material things for its own eternal good. Another thing entirely is what those of us still on earth should do with what that soul left behind. Both teachings coexist in her writings without contradiction. In the interior castle, she speaks of the soul traveling toward God by setting down its weight. In the book of her life, she speaks, though few have noticed, about the care the living owe to what belongs to the departed, because that care affects the journey of the soul who left. The Saint of Avila had seen in prayer how the souls in Purgatory perceived the gestures of their family members here on earth. She describes this in several ways throughout her writings, often without naming all the details, so as not to frighten the younger sisters in her community. But it's clear from her words that the soul of the deceased, while undergoing purification, holds a particular awareness of what is done for them and in their name. That awareness has little in common with our earthly sight. It works more like a perception of the heart, a spiritual sensitivity the soul gains precisely because it has been stripped of the body. And within that awareness, there is something that touches the soul in a very particular way. What happens to the things that once touched their skin? Picture someone who has already passed. They're in the process of being purified, and from where they are, they watch what you do with their coat. Do they perceive it? Catholic doctrine answers yes, in a mysterious way we can't see, but one that's real. And what they perceive depends on how you do it. If you do it with prayer and clear intention, offering the gesture as a spiritual gift to God, the soul feels relief. If you do it the way you'd toss out an old box in a hurry, without asking God for anything on their behalf, the soul feels abandoned. That perception is solid theology. The Church has taught it for centuries when speaking about the power of suffrages and the spiritual reality of purgatory. Souls need help. They need us to remember them, to name them, to offer something for them. And among everything we can offer, the one that best fits the moment of giving away their clothes takes a very concrete shape. It's a work done with the hands. One of the works the Gospel calls corporal. Here's where the detail almost nobody checks before stuffing clothes into a bag comes in. Saint Teresa of Jesus left behind a concrete bridge, a bridge connecting your gesture today to the soul of the one you love. A bridge built from 3 simple elements that have to come together in the same act. If even one is missing, the bridge collapses. The garment leaves your house, reaches the stranger, shields them from the cold. But the soul of the one who once wore it doesn't receive the good they were hoping for. That bridge and the 3 elements holding it up were described by the Saint of Avila with the clarity of someone who had seen it in prayer. You're about to understand exactly what they are. Why so many devout families empty out a loved one's closet thinking they're doing an act of charity, and without realizing it, leave that soul waiting for a fruit that never arrives. And the most painful part of all, why the person you hand that garment to completely changes what that soul receives from heaven. March. 2 widows in 2 different towns. The same idea. Clear out the closet that hurts to open every night. The first one folds each piece of clothing carefully, makes a bundle, takes it to her parish priest, and asks for 2 things. Bless the clothes and offer a mass for her husband. She leaves the parish with her eyes full, but with a peace in her chest she hadn't felt since the funeral. The second one stuffs everything into large trash bags, carries them down to the lobby, calls the neighborhood donation pickup, shuts her door, and goes back to her chair. The weight in her chest is still there, the same as it was that morning when she woke up. From the outside, both women did exactly the same thing. Both emptied a closet. Both gave the clothes away so someone in need could use them. And yet what happened on the inside, in each of those 2 homes, and what happened to the souls of those 2 husbands in their place of purification, was completely different. Saint Teresa of Jesus explained this in the way of perfection, with a clarity that still cuts straight to the point today. In her own words, she taught that the value of any work of charity depends on the love behind it, the love done for God. The outward appearance counts for little. What carries weight before the Lord is the intention, the hidden motive, the silent prayer that accompanies the gesture. When the first widow brought her bundle to the priest, She was already doing something more than just handing over clothes. She was offering the gesture to God. She was asking that this act become a suffrage for her husband's soul. She was joining what her hands were doing with what her heart was asking. When the second widow left her bags in the lobby without giving it a second thought, she made the exact same physical motion, but without having offered anything to heaven. And what isn't offered doesn't arrive. This is where the first bridge breaks, and almost nobody notices it happening. Intention. If your hand gives but your heart is somewhere else, what reaches the soul of the deceased is the coldness of watching their belongings go out the door with no prayer attached. The spiritual fruit of the gesture gets lost along the way. The souls in purgatory depend on the living for many things they can no longer do for themselves. One of those things is offering. Only the living can offer. Only the living can take a material act and, through their intention, turn it into a suffrage that brings relief. This is how Saint Teresa of Jesus answers the question you've been carrying in your chest since the first line of this story. The entire difference lives in the intention of the one giving. It lives in the hidden motive, in what's asked silently while the hands close the bag. If that gift carries prayer, the soul of the departed receives it like an embrace. If it goes out empty, like trash put out from habit, the soul feels only the coldness of a chore and is left waiting. But the teaching doesn't stop there. Saint Teresa of Jesus saw something else, something almost too quiet for modern ears to catch. She saw that two people with the same intention, both praying with real devotion, could produce very different spiritual effects on the soul of the deceased. How is that possible? The answer has to do with something almost no Catholic family checks before sealing the bag of clothes. Exactly whose hands that garment ends up in. Because there's a world of difference between the hands that might receive those clothes. There are hungry hands, hands that haven't had a decent coat in months, the hands of a father who spent the whole winter with just one jacket. There are hands that genuinely need that garment to survive the real cold. And then there are hands that will sell it the next day at a thrift shop, hands that will toss it into a resale bin, hands that don't even know they're receiving a dead man's clothes. The difference between those hands completely changes what heaven applies to the soul of the person who wore that garment for years. Saint Teresa of Jesus left it written that a suffrage reaches its full strength when it lands in the hands of a truly poor person in genuine need. And it weakens almost to nothing when that same garment ends up in some nameless commercial pipeline. Think about what happens every day, right now, in thousands of devout homes. A daughter clears out her late father's clothes, drops the bags in the street bin, goes home believing she's done a work of charity. In many cases, that clothing never reaches a poor person at all. It goes to an international resale company, gets sorted by the pound, gets shipped overseas, gets sold in second-hand markets. That chain feeds an industry. The work of mercy never gets fulfilled because the soul of the deceased is waiting to see one very specific gospel work carried out. Clothing the naked. A work of mercy with a precise recipient. One that loses its weight before God if that recipient never shows up. That's why the first widow walked away in peace and the second one didn't. The first had done two things at once. She'd offered the gesture with clear intention, and she'd placed the clothes in the priest's hands so they'd reach someone who truly needed them. The second only made the physical gesture, with no intention behind it and no idea where the clothes were headed. Both believed they were giving charity. Only one actually gave the kind that arrives. In just a moment, you're going to see how a truly poor person is recognized, how you can confirm a garment is reaching where it's supposed to reach, and why so many families who clear out a closet with the very best intentions discover, months later, that the peace they were hoping for never quite settles in at home. What you thought you knew about this gesture and about the soul of the person who passed is about to change. It's Tuesday, 11 in the morning. The parish hall smells like candle wax and fresh whitewash. Light pours through a high window and lands on the table where two volunteer sisters are sorting clothes into neat piles. The older sister wears a blue apron, reading glasses hanging from her neck, her hands steady despite her 70 years. She separates each garment at a slow pace, the way someone prays through every gesture they make. At the other end of the table, a woman in her mid-50s has just handed over a large bag. She's the one who closed that closet 2 hours ago. She's the widow. The volunteer sister takes the bag without pulling anything out yet, tells her, "May the Lord repay you 1,000 times over for this, dear," and sets it behind the counter. The widow stands still for a few seconds, looks at the door, looks at the floor, walks out slowly. At the very same hour, 3 neighborhoods away, a man we'll call Andrew walks toward that same parish. He's wearing an old jacket that doesn't keep out the cold anymore. He's had it since his son-in-law gave it to him 8 winters ago. They told him to come by the clothing closet today, said they'd just gotten some good things in. Things that belonged to a man who'd passed away a few months back. Andrew takes a deep breath before opening the door. He doesn't like asking for help. Never has. He steps inside. The sister in the blue apron recognizes him, greets him with a tired smile, walks him over to the table where that morning's donations are laid out. She pulls the gray coat out of the bag, holds it up in front of him, gives it a little shake to air it out, and hands it to him. This is happening right now. Andrew touches the wool with his fingertips. Good wool, thick, a deep gray you don't really find in stores anymore. He slides his arms into the sleeves. It fits. It fits him perfectly, like it was made for him. He buttons it all the way up and feels something he wasn't expecting to feel this morning, a warmth with weight to it. A warmth carrying the memory of another body, another Sunday walk, an entire other life of work and family Sundays. In that very same second, in the invisible place where souls are purified, the soul of the deceased feels it. He feels it as a relief no earthly word can fully capture, because the garment arrived, because it is, right now, in this very minute, on the body of a man who truly needed it, because the gospel work of mercy has been fulfilled in his name, and the suffrage the widow offered that morning at the parish has just been applied, in full, to his soul. This is what Saint Teresa of Jesus saw in prayer. The Saint of Avila described, in several passages of her writings, how the souls in Purgatory perceived the acts of charity done for them. She said the soul feels a concrete relief, almost physical, even with no body left, when a work of mercy is fulfilled in its intended purpose. And that this perception grows even sharper, even more intimate, when the work involves something that belonged to that soul in life, like that jacket resting on Andrew's shoulders in a parish hall on a Tuesday at 11 in the morning. In the book of her foundations, the Saint of Avila wrote that God tends to arrange things so that the good a soul did on earth comes back, multiplied on the other shore. That's why the gesture of giving away clothes, when it's done right, works like a double seed. He clothed the poor in life through the sweat of his working days. He clothes them again after death through the garment he wore for so many years. The two plantings meet before God's throne and become one single harvest of grace for the soul. Andrew catches his reflection in the mirror at the back of the room. He looks taller. He looks more whole. His chin trembles a little. He thanks the sister in the apron in a low voice, almost broken. He walks out onto the street with the coat on. The cold is still there, but it no longer touches his body. Andrew walks 5 blocks, makes his way slowly up to his apartment, sits down at the kitchen table without taking the coat off, and slowly prays a full Our Father for the family he never knew who let it go. And in his chest, without him even knowing it, someone has just received the most intimate embrace heaven had been saving for him through months of purification. This is what happens when all three elements line up at once: a clear intention, a recipient who truly needs it, and the right hands along the road between the home of the deceased and the body of the poor. The soul of the deceased then receives the full fruit without losing a single drop along the way. But Saint Teresa of Jesus also saw the other scenario, the one that happens when one of those elements is missing, the one that happens when the four traps that almost every devout family falls into come into play all at once, without anyone ever naming them from the pulpit. And right here, at this exact point in the story, something your heart has been waiting for since the very first line gets decided. Saint Teresa of Jesus left behind the bridge that holds up this moment. Without it, everything you just heard about Andrew and the widow stays on the material plane, never crossing the veil. With it, it crosses from one side to the other and arrives exactly where it needs to go. What comes next will change the way you look at a deceased loved one's closet forever, and it will also change how you fold the next garment you have to give away. You're about to learn what almost no devout woman has ever heard in full from the pulpit. In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 25, there's a scene your heart has known since your first communion: the final judgment. Christ separates the nations the way a shepherd separates sheep from goats. And to those he places on his right, he says one single line, a line that forever changed the theology of Christian charity. I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was naked, and you clothed me. And the righteous ask him, surprised, when they ever saw him hungry or naked and clothed him. Christ's answer was etched into every father of the church, every council, every catechism. Whatever you did for one of the least of these, you did it for me. Saint Teresa of Jesus built her entire mystical theology on this truth. She read it countless times, meditated on it countless times, lived it every time her community received or gave away anything. In her own words, the Saint of Avila taught that Christ lives hidden within every poor person, and that any work done for a poor person reaches straight to the Lord's heart. That conviction carried her every time she handed out bread at the convent gate, every time she opened the storeroom to give away the little they had. Here is the first stone of the bridge. Clothing the naked is one of the 7 corporal works of mercy Christ will ask us about at the final judgment. When you offer that work as a suffrage for a soul in purgatory, the spiritual chain forms like this. You give the garment with clear intention, the poor person receives it in their real need, Christ receives the work as though it were done to him directly, and the soul of the deceased, in whose name the gesture was made, receives the fruit multiplied through Christ. 4 links, 1 chain. Pull out the first link, give without intention, and the chain stays dangling on the human side, never reaching heaven. Pull out the second link, let the garment end up in a commercial resale pipeline, and Christ no longer shows up to receive the work, because Christ makes himself present only in the body of the specific poor person who needs that garment to keep warm. At no point in a commercial supply chain is his face waiting to be recognized. This closes a question you've been hearing since the beginning: why it matters so much whose hands the garment ends up in. Because the one ultimately receiving it is Christ in hiding, and only when Christ receives the work can it be applied as a suffrage for the soul of the one you loved and lost. This is the bridge Saint Teresa of Jesus left written between your gesture and the soul of the departed. 3 elements. 1. Intention offered in concrete words, something like, "Lord, I offer this gift for the soul of my father." 2. A recipient who is truly poor, in real need, able to actually use the garment for their own body. 3. The right hands along the way, meaning a person or institution of the church that receives and distributes the garment as a suffrage, with prayer, with blessing, within the sacramental order. In the book of her life, Saint Teresa of Jesus describes how, during the hardest years of the Carmelite reform, she and her sisters had so little to give away that often the only thing they could offer was the clothes off their own backs. And she tells how, after handing her own cloak to a poor woman at the convent gate, she felt in prayer a fresh clarity about the doctrine of the mystical body. She understood that every garment given in love becomes a seed the Lord multiplies, and that this multiplied fruit can be applied by the will of the giver to the soul of a deceased loved one. That's why the Church's tradition has taught for centuries that works of mercy done in a deceased person's name are among the most effective suffrages there are. More effective than flowers on a grave. More effective than an elaborate funeral monument. More effective than any marble headstone, however costly. The concrete work done for a concrete body that receives the garment in genuine need. That's what Christ will count on the day of judgment. That's what the soul of the deceased needs us to do for them. St. John Chrysostom, in one of his most famous sermons, said that the souls in purgatory rejoice more over a loaf of bread given in their name than over a tomb of gold carved by the finest craftsmen. Saint Teresa of Jesus repeated that same teaching in the convent parlor. Whenever noble ladies came to tell her about the grand funerals they were planning for their late husbands, she would listen first, let them describe every detail of the procession, the catafalque, the embroidered coats of arms. And then, with that motherly firmness only she had, she'd gently tell them that if they truly wanted to help their husband's soul, they should take part of that money and give it to the actual poor people of the town, in his name, with explicit prayer for his rest. Everything else, she said, served as decoration for the living. The soul of the deceased was left without the help it had been hoping for from heaven. 3 elements. If all 3 are present, the soul receives heaven's embrace in the very instant the poor person tries on the garment. If one is missing, the bridge stays incomplete, and the soul is left waiting for a fruit nobody ever sends. This is where the most painful part of this whole teaching begins, because nearly every devout family, without realizing it, fails on one of these elements. And nearly all of them fall into one of the 4 traps the Saint of Avila recognized with real sorrow, having watched them repeat themselves home after home. The first trap is the most common of all, the one you've probably fallen into without even knowing it, the one you're about to understand right now, with your heart wide open and no defenses left. Thursday afternoon, 3 weeks after the funeral, the daughter finally decides it's time. She opens her father's closet door, takes a deep breath, and starts emptying out everything she sees. She moves fast. She'd been told it was better to do it all at once without stopping to smell the clothes. 3 hours, she figures. 3 hours and it's done. In those 3 hours, she stuffs everything into large bags. Shirts, pants, coats, old shoes, ties, winter sweaters, pajamas. At 6 in the evening, she calls the neighborhood clothing pickup. They tell her they'll come by tomorrow at 9. She carries the bags down to the landing, closes her apartment door, sits down on the couch, breathes out a relief that lasts about 3 minutes. 3 minutes. And then, without knowing why, a heavy sadness settles into her chest. A sadness she hadn't even felt at the funeral, as if something that needed to happen never did. The house feels emptier than before, and far less at peace. And her father, somewhere unseen, might be watching her from a distance, unable to understand why no one prayed an Our Father during these 3 long hours. That's it. That's the first trap, the most common one of all. Giving without praying, emptying the closet without once opening your mouth to ask the Lord to direct that gesture toward the soul of the deceased. Doing the material work without ever making the spiritual offering that turns it into a suffrage. Saint Teresa of Jesus said it with the simplicity of the great masters of the spiritual life. In her own words, she taught that works done without clear intention before God lose most of their supernatural value. They can still be useful on the human level, They can clothe the poor and feed the hungry. But the soul of the deceased in whose name they were done doesn't receive the fruit, because that fruit was never directed toward them from earth. There's a key word in all of Catholic spiritual theology: offer. It's what the priest does at every Mass when he raises the bread and wine before the Father. It's what you do when you say the morning offering as you get out of bed. And it's the thing missing from almost every everyday gesture made in a house in mourning. Without an offering, the material act just floats there with no clear destination. With an offering, the material act crosses the veil and reaches exactly where the heart asked it to go. In The Way of Perfection, Saint Teresa of Jesus repeatedly insisted that her nuns should live out every task of the day with this supernatural dimension: eating, sewing, sweeping, receiving, and giving alms. They offered every single gesture to God in explicit words, because she knew that without that intention, spoken aloud or in silence, even the most generous gestures shrank down to a natural virtue with no eternal merit to apply to souls. The Saint of Avila also had a practice she recommended to every woman who came to speak with her in the parlor. Before starting any significant task of the day, say a short prayer, placing that task in the Lord's hands. Before cooking, offer the meal for the soul of someone deceased. Before heading out to run errands, offer every step for the blessed souls. Before opening a closet full of memories, offer the whole act for the soul of the person who left that hanging clothing behind. She said that this offering made with concrete words turned any material act into a suffrage applicable to a soul in purgatory. And here's the part that hurts. Almost nobody has ever taught you to offer up the giving away of a deceased loved one's clothes. Catechism classes talk plenty about keeping the faith, about praying, about going to Mass every Sunday. But almost nobody told you, when you buried your father, that the day you cleared out his closet, you should kneel for a moment in front of the crucifix in your living room and say out loud, "Lord, I offer this gift for the soul of my father. May this clothing on the body of the poor person who receives it become eternal rest for him. May the gospel work of mercy be fulfilled in his name and for the relief of his soul." That's all it takes. One sentence, 30 seconds, and the whole bridge is built. But that sentence doesn't get said because nobody teaches it, because everyone assumes it's enough just to give the clothes away and let heaven handle the rest. And it isn't enough. A material act with no intention offered behind it works like a letter with no address written on the envelope. It does arrive somewhere, but rarely where it was supposed to go. That's why the soul of the deceased feels what it feels when the giving is done without prayer. It feels the dryness, the coldness of a chore done out of habit, the distance between the hands that gave and the heart that didn't pray. And in the worst cases, it feels abandoned. It feels that their family made the physical gesture, but never thought of them in heart or in words. The souls in purgatory receive many things with joy. They receive masses and rosaries and alms and short prayers. But they receive, with a very specific kind of pain, the spiritual indifference of the very people who loved them most in life and who stopped short of offering the prayer that actually mattered. This is the first trap, giving without praying. The one you've probably committed without realizing it, like almost every devout woman who's had to clear out a loved one's closet over these last few decades. But there are 3 other traps, even more subtle and even more painful, that Saint Teresa of Jesus recognized with the sharp eye of someone who had seen them repeat in so many homes. The second one has a name that hurts just to say it out loud: giving while holding resentment inside. Watch the hand that's folding the garment now. Grief makes it tremble one way. Resentment makes it tremble another. Grief folds slowly, almost asking the fabric's forgiveness for having to let it go. Resentment folds fast, with those clipped movements the body makes when it wants to get something over with, that weighs more than it's willing to admit. Both hands look the same on the surface. What changes is what's happening underneath, in an invisible space where grief and resentment leave very different marks. And the garment carries, without anyone ever checking, the inner imprint of the hand that folded it. This is the second trap, giving with resentment. And it hurts to even name it because almost nobody recognizes it in themselves at first. But it's there. It's there in plenty of Catholic homes, you know, without realizing it's there. It's there in the daughter who cared for her sick father alone for 10 years with no help, and who, as she closes the bag, feels an old bitterness she doesn't even dare admit to. It's there in the widow who discovered, after the funeral, a massive debt her husband left behind. It's there in the son who never got the chance to make peace with his mother before she died. In every one of these cases, the hands fold the clothes carrying an inner weight different from clean grief. And that weight, without them ever knowing it, stains the offering their hands are trying to make. Saint Teresa of Jesus understood this danger with tremendous precision. In the way of perfection, she speaks at length about the poison resentment spreads over any good work. She said you can't offer the Lord a gesture mixed with bitterness without turning it into an incomplete offering. And the most subtle bitterness of all, she warned, is the kind held against the deceased person themselves, against their failures, against their silences, against the words they never said and now never can. When that daughter stuffs the shirts into the bag, telling herself, without fully putting it into words, at least this is finally over, the Lord receives the offering, but it's tainted. He receives the matter, but not the heart. And matter without heart loses nearly all its supernatural force. The soul of the deceased, in the invisible place of their purification, feels how the suffrage sent their way arrives contaminated by something that bears little resemblance to love. That's why Saint Teresa of Jesus insisted so strongly that works of charity for the deceased be preceded by an inner act of forgiveness. Forgive the deceased. Forgive the pain that person left behind when they went. Before giving away the clothes, sit for 5 minutes in front of the crucifix and say quietly, Lord, I hand over to you whatever resentment I'm carrying in my chest. I want to give him what he needs right now and to set down this weight I'm carrying. With that prior act, the offering comes out clean, and the soul of the deceased can receive the full fruit with nothing tainting it along the way. There's a third trap, wanting to move on too quickly, giving the clothes away just to get your own heart some immediate relief without thinking about the soul that should receive the suffrage behind the gesture. Calling the first organization that pops up in a phone search without asking where those clothes are going, without making sure the chain actually reaches a body that truly needs them. This trap is, in a way, a new one. Old Catholic families, when they gave away a deceased person's clothing, almost always brought it straight to the parish priest or to a specific poor person in town. They knew exactly where it was going. They saw the body that received it. The chain stayed closed across 3 points: the deceased's family, the priest, the poor person in the village. Today that chain has stretched so far that almost nobody knows where what they give away actually ends up. The bags get dropped into anonymous bins, loaded onto trucks, hauled to sorting centers, exported, sold by the pound in second-hand markets. The deceased is left without a clear recipient, and the soul without a certain suffrage. Saint Teresa of Jesus never knew donation bins, but she knew their spiritual equivalent, giving without knowing where it goes. She described it as a material act that fails to become a true work of mercy because it's missing the eye of the heart. She said that giving to the poor means looking at the poor, touching their hand if you can, knowing their name, even just for a few brief minutes. When that human contact gets broken and replaced by a bag dropped in a hallway and forgotten, the work stays incomplete before God. That's why Saint Teresa of Jesus asked her nuns, whenever they gave alms, to always look the poor person in the eye, because in that gaze, Christ became present between the two bodies, and the suffrage was completed in heaven's order. The gaze carried as much weight as the garment itself. These two traps, giving with resentment and giving just to move on, tend to show up together in devout families. One feeds the other without anyone noticing. The daughter carrying resentment wants to finish quickly, and the one who wants to finish quickly never checks where the clothes she's tossing into the bag are actually going. Both cut off the flow of grace meant to reach the soul of the deceased. Both leave the soul waiting for a fruit that never ripens. But there's still a fourth trap, the least known of all. Almost no family, not even the most devout in the parish, avoids it without realizing they've fallen into it. It has to do with a step the Church taught for centuries that has simply fallen off the calendar of mourning, without anyone noticing it was gone. It's the trap Saint Teresa of Jesus wrote about insistently, and it's the one you're about to understand right now, with your heart closed to what the soul of the deceased is hoping for from you. 100 years ago, no devout Catholic family would have dreamed of giving away a deceased person's clothing without first asking for a priest's blessing over the garments. It was an understood step, as obvious as praying the rosary for the deceased during the 9 days after burial. Before the clothes left the house, they passed through the hands of the village priest, who sprinkled them with holy water and said a short prayer commending the soul of the departed. Only after that step did the clothes go to the poor. Today, that practice has all but disappeared from the Catholic calendar of mourning. Almost no one teaches it in catechism anymore or remembers it at home. Almost no priest actively offers it to families who come to speak with him about the deceased in the days after a burial. And yet, without that step, the bridge Saint Teresa of Jesus described is left with an invisible crack that no amount of good human intention, however sincere, can fully patch from the inside. This is the fourth trap, giving away clothes without a prior blessing. And to understand it, we need to remember something the Church has taught since its earliest centuries. Sacramentals exist. The Church calls sacramentals those sacred signs that dispose the soul to receive grace and apply spiritual fruit to the material things they touch. Holy water, blessed salt, medals, scapulars, priestly blessings over people, places, and objects. They all belong to a different order from the 7 sacraments, but are connected to it, and the Church considers them authentic vehicles of divine grace that the Lord distributes through them. When a priest blesses a garment, he isn't performing an empty symbolic act. He's asking God that this object, as it passes to another person and takes on its new purpose, become a channel of grace for everyone involved. The garment once blessed no longer functions like an ordinary piece of clothing. It carries upon it the prayer of the entire Church, which is the prayer of Christ applied through the priest's ministry. And that prayer travels with the garment all the way to the body of the poor person who will receive it, and from the body of the poor person all the way to the soul of the deceased in whose name it was given that very morning. Saint Teresa of Jesus had a deep devotion to sacramentals. In her writings, she mentions the use of holy water again and again in her daily life, in her cell, in her prayers. She said the devil especially feared holy water and anything blessed by the Church, because those signs drive him out of any space they occupy. And she applied this principle to every situation involving mourning, including the giving away of a deceased person's belongings to the poor. She knew that a blessed object enters the Church's sacramental order and becomes a fitting vehicle for carrying grace to the soul waiting on the other side of the veil. Picture the difference between two bags that look identical on the outside. Both contain the exact same clothing from the exact same deceased person. Both will reach the exact same poor person by the exact same route. One left the house without ever passing through the priest's hands. The other was blessed the day before with the widow and her family present in the sacristy, with a specific prayer offered for the soul of the deceased. When the poor person puts on the garment from the first bag, he receives warmth. When he puts on the garment from the second bag, he receives warmth, and without even knowing it, he's cooperating in a sacramental act applied on behalf of a soul being purified. The second bag functions as a complete suffrage. The first remains a material gift that heaven applies with far less spiritual force. And here's the final trap, the one almost every devout family falls into, because nobody has ever warned them about it from the pulpit. Skipping the blessing, taking the clothes straight to the donation center, the bin, the lobby, without ever asking a priest to sprinkle them with holy water and say a prayer for the soul. It's a small step. 5 minutes in the sacristy after Sunday Mass. And yet that small step completely changes the spiritual weight of everything that follows it. Some devout women have stumbled onto this practice almost by accident. A grandmother in Salamanca, a widow in Puebla, a daughter in Bogota. Women who decided, without quite knowing why, to bring the clothes to the parish priest before giving them away. Who asked for a blessing without realizing they were reviving an ancient practice of the Church, and who discovered afterward an inner peace that caught them off guard. That inner peace has a precise theological explanation. It's the soul of the deceased in the invisible place of their purification, giving thanks from there for a suffrage that arrived complete, with no cracks, within the sacramental order the Church has always taught. This is what Saint Teresa of Jesus left written about the 4 traps that break the bridge between your gesture and the soul of the one you loved. Missing intention, staining resentment, careless haste with no thought for where the gift ends up, and a blessing left out altogether. 4 different cracks the bridge can break along, leaving the soul of the deceased waiting, never receiving, for the fruit the family believed they'd sent by giving the clothes away. But there's good news. All 4 traps have a fix, and the fix fits into just a few minutes of prayer the day before you take that bag anywhere. When all 4 elements come together in the same act, the soul of the deceased receives, in the very second the poor person tries on the jacket, the most complete embrace heaven can send to a soul in purification. And the family who emptied the closet feels on the way back home a new kind of peace in their chest. That peace has a name, and you're about to hear it in full right now in what comes next in this story. Let's go back to the beginning, to the shirt folded on top of the bed, to the gray coat in the bag, to the question you've been hearing since the very first line of this story. What does the soul of the person who passed feel when a stranger puts on their clothes? You now have the full answer, and here it is. When the gesture is made with all 4 conditions fulfilled in the same act, intention offered out loud, a heart cleared of resentment, a genuine recipient at the end of the road, a garment passed through a priest's blessing, the soul of the deceased feels something no human heart can fully put into earthly words. They feel it as a relief that feels like an embrace. They know their family on earth still thinks of them with a love that translates into concrete works. And they know, in the invisible order of things, that Christ received that work as if done to him directly, and that all of heaven is sending that merit toward their place of purification. Saint Teresa of Jesus left this method written down with the simplicity of someone who had practiced it for years within her own Carmelite community. 4 steps. Here they are, just as she taught them. First, the day before giving the clothes away, sit in front of the crucifix in your living room. 5 minutes of deep silence. Ask the Lord to clear your heart of every trace of resentment towards the deceased. Speak out loud the names of the wounds that still hurt and place them in Christ's hands. Settle into inner peace before touching a single garment. Second, that same day or the next morning, bring the clothes to the priest. Ask for a short blessing, 5 minutes in the sacristy after Mass. The priest sprinkles the clothes with holy water, says a prayer for the soul of the deceased, commends the gesture to the Lord on the family's behalf. the clothes leave that room already within the church's sacramental order. Third, bring the clothing to a person or institution of the church that distributes it to specific poor people in the neighborhood or town. Avoid anonymous donation bins where the chain gets lost. Look for a parish outreach ministry, a diocesan clothing closet, a Catholic organization with a real recipient and a human face. Somewhere the poor person has a name, even if you never get to see them yourself. Explicitly ask that it be given as a suffrage in the name of the deceased. Fourth, at the very moment you hand over the bag, whisper a short prayer. Lord, I offer this gift for the soul of my father, so that this clothing on the body of the poor person who receives it may become eternal rest for him. 30 seconds, and the bridge stands complete with no cracks. When these 4 steps are followed, what happens next is exactly what Saint Teresa of Jesus described in several passages of her writings. The soul of the deceased receives a special light. A light God only gives out when a work of mercy is fully completed as a suffrage for one specific soul. The Saint of Avila called it applied consolation. She said the souls who received those consolations advanced in their purification far faster than souls who only received isolated prayers with no concrete works behind them. And she added something that stops you in your tracks when you read it slowly, that this applied consolation carries the taste of family love that keeps working even after death. The soul clearly recognizes the touch of the hand that loved them in life, and that recognition in the middle of purification is one of the greatest gifts a child can give a parent or a widow her husband after burial. Picture that exact moment. Andrew, the man we talked about a little earlier, looks at himself in the mirror of the clothing closet, wearing the gray coat. The deceased man's daughter, miles away, is walking home from the sacristy where her parish priest blessed the clothes that very morning. Christ, at the invisible center of the whole scene, receives the work as done to him directly. And the soul of the deceased, in their place of purification, receives, in that same second, the full merit of the act. Not a single drop is lost on the way between the sacristy and the mirror. The bridge crosses the veil from one side to the other and pours out its full weight of grace onto the soul that had been waiting since the funeral. The family who did things this way comes home changed. The peace that settles into their chest looks nothing like that quick rush of relief that lasts 3 minutes and then crumbles. It's a peace that stays. A peace with the inner certainty of having done something real for the soul of the one they loved and lost. The house feels cleaner somehow. That feeling of emptiness is gone. The closet, now closed, no longer weighs on them. And that night, when they turn off the light, the weight in the chest we talked about at the start of this story has disappeared completely. Because the family knows, with a certainty that needs no human explanation, that this soul is closer to heaven tonight than it was yesterday. This is what Saint Teresa of Jesus revealed about what a departed soul feels when a stranger puts on their clothes. They feel all of it, and they feel it according to how you carried out the gesture from the very start. If you fell short out of not knowing, there's still time to make up for what was missing. Every day gives you a chance to do a work of mercy in your loved one's name, to offer it with clear intention before the Lord, and to ask for a blessing over something you're about to give away in their memory. Heaven doesn't close the door on those who arrive late as long as they come with an open heart, ready to do things right from now on with patience and faith. That door, for as long as your heart keeps beating here on earth, stays open for you and for the soul of the one you loved, who left the side of the living before their time. Some people listen to a line or two and move along. Some stop 5 minutes in because the subject weighs too much, because the closet at home is still shut and they're not ready to open it. Some make it halfway and freeze, phone in hand, eyes welling up, not quite sure what just happened in their chest. And some make it all the way to the end. You're one of the ones who make it to the end. And that means the soul of the person you loved and lost has in you someone who is still fighting for them. Someone who searches. Someone who asks questions. Someone who won't settle for leaving the clothes in the hallway, shutting the apartment door, and calling it done. You're carrying this question, this weight in your chest that never fully goes away, even as the months pass, even when you do everything they tell you to do at the wake, at the parish, at your siblings' houses, the weight of wondering whether you did it right, whether the soul is all right, whether any of it actually reached them. The answer you've heard today isn't something you'll find on the first result of a quick phone search. The Church has carried it for centuries, deep within its richest writings, within the teaching of saints who saw these things firsthand. And Saint Teresa of Jesus left it described with the precision of someone who isn't speaking secondhand. She saw it, she lived it, she taught it in her convents and in her books, and in her conversations with the women who came to the parlor to ask her exactly what you've been asking for months now. What does the soul feel when we give away their clothes? You now have the full answer. And it's this. It depends on you. It depends on what you do with your hands, with your heart, with prayer, and with a blessing before you close the bag and walk out the door. The soul of the deceased feels, in a way no human word can fully capture, every gesture you make for them from here on earth. They feel clean intention, and they feel dirty intention. They feel held onto resentment, and they feel forgiveness freely given. They feel the garment that reaches a truly poor person, and they feel the one that ends up in a nameless bin. They feel a priest's blessing like a relief made of light, and they feel the absence of that blessing like an invisible crack along the way. And this is where that missing piece comes from. The one so many devout women search for months after clearing out a closet, unable to understand why it never comes. The piece that depends on the whole chain, on all four links being in place, on intention and forgiveness, and the right recipient and the blessing, all together in the same gesture. When the chain is whole, peace arrives. When a link is missing, the chest keeps weighing heavy even after the clothes are long gone. 4 steps. You learned them today. 5 minutes in front of the crucifix to let go of whatever resentment still hurts. The visit to the priest with the bag before you give it away. The search for a real recipient with a name and a body that truly needs it. The whispered prayer at the moment you hand the bag into other hands. 4 small steps. And the bridge stands fully built, from earth all the way to the other side of the veil. And the soul receives, in that very moment, the most intimate embrace heaven can send. You have that now. You're carrying it with you. And the next time you have to clear out a closet or help someone else who's doing it, you have it to give them. That's the real fruit of having made it this far. Now, I want to ask you for something before you go. There's someone in your life who needs to hear this. A sister-in-law, a cousin, a friend from the parish, a neighbor who lost her husband last year and already gave the clothes away without knowing what was missing. Someone still carrying that weight in their chest that never quite lifts. Someone who deserved to hear today what you just heard. You can be the one who gets it to them. Share what you found here. Send them this video. Just say this one line. I found something that explained why my chest kept feeling heavy after I gave the clothes away. That's it. That person will hear it, and the soul of their loved one will have, in her, thanks to you, someone who now knows how to do this right. One single person. Think about who that is right now, while you still feel the weight of what you just heard. That person is waiting for you to pass this along, and passing it along is also a work of mercy. A work Saint Teresa of Jesus would have recognized at once as belonging to the mystical body of Christ. What we learn on earth, we share without holding it back. If this channel has given you something real today, there's just one thing I'll ask in return. Subscribe. Tap the bell so no video ever slips past you. There's more teaching here. More answers to questions the standard catechism class never quite gets around to. More Saint Teresa of Jesus, more teaching on the soul, more truth about purgatory and suffrages and the departed, and the love that doesn't stop with death. Think about the women who came to this channel before you. Women who arrived with a question a lot like yours. Who found an answer. Who came back. Who stayed. Who wrote things in the comments you wish you could read. The name of the garment they gave away. The name of the loved one they carried in their chest. The peace that came to them after following the 4 steps. That's the invisible thread running through this place. Devout women, women of strong faith, women who don't give up even when the grief weighs on them, joined together by the same search for spiritual truth they found here. You've been part of that thread since you arrived today. Subscribing means staying in it. It means telling the Lord you want to keep receiving what He places here for you. That's why this channel exists. So the questions nobody asks out loud in a church pew can finally get an answer. So the devout women carrying this weight in silence find a place where someone speaks to them quietly, with truth and with love. So the Catholic faith they learned from their mothers and grandmothers stays alive, rooted with all the depth the saints gave it across 20 centuries. Subscribing means staying in that place. It means telling the Lord you want to keep receiving what He places here for you. Every video on this channel is made with the same devotion the Saint of Avila brought to her writing in her cell before dawn, with the conviction that on the other end, there's someone who needs it, even if they don't know it yet. You needed it today, and you showed up. Now stay, and write it in the comments. The name of the garment you have to give away, or already did, and that short line, rest in peace to the one who wore it. The comment you leave right now is already a prayer. It's small, it fits in one line, but it gets through. Short, concrete prayers prayed from the heart reach further than long ones recited without feeling. Saint Teresa of Jesus knew that. We know it too, all of us carrying the same weight together and setting it down here together, every time someone finds this channel and stays until the very end. What comes after this video follows the same thread. There are more questions like this one, the kind nobody asks from the pulpit, the kind mothers and grandmothers used to carry settled in their souls without quite knowing why, because they'd learned it from their own mothers before the rush of the modern world slowly carried it away from us. The answers are here, in the writings of Saint Teresa of Jesus, in the living tradition of the Church, in the teaching of saints who saw these things firsthand and wrote them down so no generation would be left without them. When this video ends, the Lord already has the next step ready for you. You don't need to go looking for it. Just sit still for a moment. Let what you've seen and heard today settle into your chest, and then keep going. There's so much more. Now the farewell. In her final years, knowing death was drawing near, Saint Teresa of Jesus wrote something her sisters carefully copied down and kept. She said that God's love doesn't end when the body grows tired, that it persists and grows with time and reaches places human sight can't see, that everything we do here with love, every small gesture offered to the Lord with an open heart, flies on to wherever it needs to land without us ever having to trace its path. That's exactly what you did today by staying until this point. You gave someone you love, that someone who passed and is waiting, the gift of knowing you sought out the truth so you could help them better. That's already on its way, already traveling toward where it needs to go. And the soul of the one you loved, in that quiet place where they wait, feels it with that deep, peaceful perception only those who have crossed the threshold and no longer need words can have. Carry this with you. Carry the method of the 4 steps. Carry the certainty that the gesture of your hands holds real weight in the spiritual order. Carry the conviction that the love you felt for the one who passed multiplies the moment you turn it into a concrete work offered to the Lord. May the Lord repay you for the time you gave Him today. May Saint Teresa of Jesus, who knew the pain of mourning and the joy of heaven with the same intensity, intercede today for the soul of the one you carry in your heart. And the next time you open a closet that hurts to open, may you open it in peace, with clean hands and an offered heart, with the certainty that what you do here reaches all the way there. Until next time, dear one, may your past be a good one.